How's it everyone, this is Lolcohol, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about some of the changes to leveling, especially with regards to the wand changes. So one of the most powerful recipes in the entire game, for those of you who don't know, well, hopefully you do know, but now it's going to be gone. But the recipe was a magic wand, an alteration, and a ring, a resistance ring, and this would give you tier 8 to tier 6 cold damage to spells depending on the rarity of the ring. So if you had a rare ring, it would give you tier 6. If you had a magic ring, it would be tier 7, and a normal ring would be tier 8. This was incredibly powerful, ridiculously powerful. Best recipe, most useful recipe, at least early on. This could carry you all the way to maps, and now it's being removed, and a lot of people are saying, oh no, this is really bad, what are we going to do? We will get into the numbers, but before we do that, let's just talk about the base changes. So now, wands are going to have flat damage to spells instead of % increased spell damage. Not all wands, but a lot of wands, especially the ones early on, you're going to have this. This is a very, very small amount of damage to spells, and you are losing out on the increased damage. Losing out on this recipe is bad for spellcasters, for leveling, but let's have a look at some of the numbers over here. So, what did I do? I started out with just a very generic leveling tree, so just a few points. Seriously, just a few points. This is not 100% accurate information, but it's very general in a way that I feel is enough to give us an idea of how much of a nerf this is going to be. So for our level 8, I've just got a Stormblast Mine simulating what you would have. Stormblast Mine, added light damage, swift assembly, and then just a few points on the tree, and then I have these little ones that I've simulated. So this was the original one that you would craft at level 8, and yep, I've done that for all of these. Then I've also tested it with Spark. I've done it for the level 8 recipe, the level 20 recipe, and then I've gone a bit higher, and I'll explain why I've gone for higher levels. So we've got this. Also, early leveling setup, often you would have Frostblink with Arcane Surge. This is another early game nerf, or just, I guess, kind of a nerf in general. Arcane Surge no longer provides more spell damage globally, it just provides it locally. So if you link it to a specific skill, like Frostblink, this Arcane Surge will give Frostblink 10% more damage, but it won't give all my spells more damage. So I did take that into account. But let's have a look. So, the old Stormblast Mine, level 8, so with these 3 links and Arcane Surge and Onslaught, by the way, Onslaught also out of here, and using 2 of these wands, we're seeing about 210 hit DPS on our little Stormblast Mine. Now with the new update, we're not going to have that recipe, and we've got new implicits on the wand. We're going to be seeing about, at least on this skill, 55% less damage. So this was 96 damage. Ouch. But another thing I wanted to test was if you find an Essence of Woe, slap that on the wand, how much damage with the new base do you get? You get about 46% less damage. So early game, Act 1, you're going to be feeling this a lot as a spellcaster. It's going to be quite uncomfortable, something to get used to. Something I also wanted to test was just early game, how much damage do we get just from the implicit, so no recipe, anything like that. I'm just talking about the spell damage implicit versus the flat damage implicit, and this is actually a little bit of a buff. So overall, at least for level 8, we'll get into the higher levels. This is essentially a buff to people who don't have no idea what they're doing, people who don't know these recipes, and that's an argument that some people have said in favor of this change, in that it's positive for people who are less in the know, that aren't as aware of these possibly slightly nebulous, hard to find recipes. So people who are just playing the game for the first time, they're going to feel like they have a little bit more damage, but the rest of us, you're going to feel, at least in Act 1, possibly Act 2, that you're doing about half as much damage on a spellcaster. Now I've done the same thing for level 20 with Stormblast Mine. You can see a level 20 with a 3 link, seeing about 540 damage, and then with just the new wand, no Arcane Surge, Onslaught, and not that vendor SP, 53% less damage. So I'm going to say just around 50% less damage it's going to feel like, And then if you do have a Muttering Essence of Woe, it's going to feel like 38% less damage. Again, these are not hard numbers, but it is a general idea. So the same thing with Spark, we're seeing about 50% less damage with the new wand, just a white new wand compared to the old vendor recipe wand. Same thing with the WoW, about 40% less damage. And this is going to be the same with the level 21. So remember I showed you there are the different recipes. The tier 1, this is the tier 6. This requires level 20 to use this wand. And this is the other one, which is just requires level 8. There is also one that requires level 14 with tier 7, but very few people did that. So I just ignored that one. But yeah, you can see with Stormblast Mine, 53% less damage compared to the level 21. Over here, same thing. It's about 50% to 32% less damage. However, there is one big caveat to this. In Act 3 and Act 4, we start getting flat damage to spells for our bench craft. We get these in Solaris Temple level 2, Crystal Veins, and Lunaris level 2. These are actually pretty decent tiers of flat damage to spells. And then in Act 7, we get even higher tier bench crafts. So we get, I don't know quite exactly what this is equivalent to, maybe tier 4 or 5? Probably tier 5. So I wanted to do another test, which is how do these early game vendor recipe wands compare to a new wand with the new bench recipe. So I've looked at that, I've compared it to these new bases, and let's see. So with a level 36 character, that's around the time you would get to these parts of the game, Act 3, Act 4. Old recipe, still superior in this way. However, one of the new wand bases with just the bench crafted mod, this Act 3, Act 4 one, you're going to be getting about 10% less damage. So that's when you're going to start feeling like it's not too bad. It's actually all right. However, if you do get an Essence of Woe, slap that on your little wand and then bench on some flat damage spells, then you're actually going to feel like, hey, I'm actually doing more damage than before. Now, this is also with the 4 link. Same thing over here with Stormblast Mine. This one was for Spark, about 14% less damage. And with the Benchcraft and an Essence of Woe, we're getting 11% more damage. Now, I also wanted to check these Benchcrafted mods, which you get in Act 7. And it's looking kind of similar. You can see the old wand recipe. You were getting more damage. But with the new one, you're only getting about 13% less. Again, this is just with the new base. I did check the base type and then the bench recipe, and it's about 13. We can just round it up, let's say 10 to 15% less damage. But if you get an Essence of Woe, slap that on, do the benchcraft, and then you're actually going to be seeing a bit more damage. So the way I'm seeing this is Acts 1 and 2, it's going to feel a bit worse. Then when you get into the higher acts, it's possibly going to feel a bit better, or at least very similar. Now, something else to add. Often what you would do with this early recipe is you would get this, which is nice. It's just a magic item with a prefix. Then you go over to your crafting bench. Once you hit Act 3 or 4, craft on an extra resistance. So over here, you are having to craft on with the bench flat damage to spells. So you're missing out on that resistance, which is quite a bit of a drawback. The fact that you have to lose resistances just to kind of catch up to the point where you were is definitely a bit sad, but it's not too dramatic. Some people are actually saying they like this. I think it's going to feel bad in Act 1 and 2. However, on the other hand, I have always felt like spellcasters have such a massive advantage when it comes to leveling. You just do this recipe in Act 1. You do it in Act 2 again with the rare ring, and you basically set up until maps. You've got your weapons, you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to think about it, you just run all the way to maps, sorted. Whereas if you're playing an attack build, you have to constantly check for upgrades, use recipes on new bases you find, slam things with essences, try and get upgrades. It's a much bigger struggle when you're playing an attack-based build, and I feel like this kind of brings spellcasters more in line. So instead of just doing this one recipe in Act 2 and not thinking about your weapons for the rest of the game unless you luckily find a drop, now you're actually going to be playing more, you're going to be more engaged with your weapons. You're going to be saying, okay, this is actually a new base that has a new implicit that does more damage. I'm going to try hit it with an essence, maybe get something good, benchcraft and something. It's a bit more engaged than just dead brain. I did my recipe in Act 2, don't have to worry about it anymore. So that's about it for this. As for these changes to Onslaught, the Onslaught gem being removed from the game, honestly, a bit weird, but I don't think it's going to affect the vast majority of players. It's going to affect people who are speedrunners, absolute top tier players, people like my friend Timmy. He's going to feel this change. He's a very, very skilled speedrunner. But the reason why you probably, if you're an average player who takes 10 hours to get through the campaign, this is not suddenly going to make you take 12 hours. It's probably going to, honestly, probably not even going to notice the difference. The reason why speedrunners, however, are going to notice a change like this much more significantly is because speedrunners are always moving. They're always on their feet. They never stop in town to, check their stash and see, oh, what do I have? Oh, I need to buy that gem. Where's that gem? Over there. These guys are just moving. So for them, 20% movement speed, they have a 99% uptime on their movement speed, and buffs like Onslaught are on their characters working, let's say 90% of the time. Whereas if you're a normie player, you're probably spending half your time in town. You're not getting the benefit of that Onslaught gem as much as a speedrunner would. So even though it is a bit of a weird change, I kind of wish it hadn't happened. If you're a normal player, you're probably not going to feel it. And as for the Arcane Surge nerf, it kind of got the elemental overload treatment where it now only affects the gem to which it is linked. It now at least gives some kind of cast damage, and the Hierophant has some of the old benefits of Arcane Surge. But yeah, you are going to feel there's a whole lot of little tiny taps on, well, some tiny and bigger taps on early game leveling that are going to compound and feel a bit worse. So if you're playing a spellcaster, definitely going to feel it in the first couple of acts, but don't stress. Once you get some recipes, once you get some more gear, it should be okay. Let me know what you think. Is this the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your entire life? Or do you think that we're going to be able to overcome this hurdle? I'm very curious about everyone's reactions in general to 3.21. So let me know. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Stay safe. Take care. And I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.
Exile, you're making me nervous.